This is another video on the Schwinn Meridian three-wheel bicycle tips that I've been making, and this one's going to be about the front brake. So let's take a look at this. I do appreciate all the comments. I read them all and I try to reply to all of them that I can. And so what I'm going to show you on this is, first off, when you go to put your bicycle together, I briefly touched in it the video before about releasing your brake to get your front wheel up in the front. So I want to show you how you release this brake so you can get your wheel in and out. So if you just squeeze the top here, and that's just like squeezing the brake, that will give you some slack, and you hold on to the cable and pull it back, and I should have pulled that back so you can see it, and it just slips out just like that, as simple as can be. And that's how you would open or loosen or release the front brake. And now you can take your tire and put it up in here without any problems at all, and then reassemble. And to reassemble it, you just reverse the process. You just squeeze it together. And you might notice that there is a little slot here. And that is where the cable retainer will slide into. I'm trying to do this so you can see it at the same time, and that's a little tricky. There we go. And just come on, pop in. There we go. So that's just the way it was. You can put that little rubber grommet on there to protect it with the dirt. But I have had some people talking about that the front brake doesn't stop, or that I have had one person say that it won't release. Now, I did another video about the back brake, and in that video, like I've said before, now I'm not a bicycle mechanic, but I am pretty well mechanically inclined. Your front brake is what does all of your stopping. So it's okay that whether your back brake really works really good or not, but it's really important that your front brake works. And when it works good, it will stop you. So you may need to do some adjusting if this is not stopping you. Now, we'll spin the front wheel, and this is stopping really well. But if you need to make an adjustment, there are a couple different places that you can do that. You can adjust it up here at the top, and I will get to that in a minute, or you can adjust it down here below. Now, this would be your secondary adjustment. The reason I'm not doing that one is because I don't have a camera on it yet. But this one here, you would take a 5mm, I believe it is, 5mm hex or Allen wrench, it's metric, and wrench, and you would loosen this nut right here. And when you loosen it, then you can tighten or loosen the brake. And you would only need to do this if the adjustment was really far out, or if you were replacing the shoes and you needed to make a big adjustment. You would loosen that, and then you can see how you can tighten it and loosen it. And you'll notice whenever you crimp down on this cable, it smashes it and messes it up and distorts it, and you have different little pieces of wire maybe sticking out. If you need to replace this cable, and that's why I'm not really getting into moving this, because these cables, if you go to replace it, you need to have a nice clean end. So you would have to cut this off and take this out and then fish it back through, and I don't want to do that because I actually would have to have a new cable to do that. As you can see, this end, how it's been deformed, and to fish this through the sheath, that's what this is called, this is a sheath, it will get hung up, and it's a real pain in the butt. But just to kind of show you that if you need to do that adjusting, and I will show you up on the handlebars here in a little bit how you would, if you needed to replace the cable, how you can do that. But this is where you loosen the cable down on the actual brake and adjust it to wherever you want it, and then you would just tighten this back up And that's when you tighten this up, you will smash the cable and you deform it. But that's what you want it to do so it doesn't go anywhere. And as we can see, it stops just fine. If you wanted to replace the shoes, if your brake shoes are wearing, or for some reason, if your brake shoes aren't rubbing, maybe they're rubbing up on your tire, or they're rubbing only on half of your rim, you need to adjust them. What we will do there is, again, squeeze this together, pull this out, and now we have this loose. Now, the person that had contacted me about their brakes sticking, that is really that's a rarity. And that, if it's sticking, if you're stopping with the brake and then letting go and your wheel is stuck, that's telling me that there is something in here that is binding on one of the two sides of your brake, and you would want to loosen this, and then you would loosen this bolt here, take this assembly off and clean it and lubricate it and put it back on. That would be the first thing I would do. The other thing is, if you can see in here, there's a little wire right here. This is an actual spring, and the spring may have broke, and that's not making your brake caliper, I guess you would call it, come away from your wheel. So that could be a problem also, is if this spring in here is broken, it's not returning and not coming off of your wheel, and that could be why it could rub, but I don't think that it would really stick. The other thing that could be going on is you could have a rusty cable, and whenever you squeeze and you let go, that cable doesn't want to release the brake, and that's another reason why it may be sticking. So let's take a look at if you need to replace or if you need to adjust your brake shoe. And again, that 5mm metric Allen wrench, you just loosen this bolt right here. I guess it's a nut, actually, is what it is. You can see here that it is a nut. It's not actually a bolt. There's a washer, and I'm taking care to see how these washers are, there we go, are on there. And then you just take the shoe out, just like this, and then you would put the shoe back in, the new shoe, and put the washers back on in the order that they came off. And then put this, it's a conical nut. Now this is where you're going to have a little bit of adjustment. As you can see, when I'm closing this, I'm pushing this brake against the wheel. See how the shoe is not riding against the rim correctly. And there's a slot in this caliper here that you can move this up. And here is where your brake shoe is rubbing against your tire. You don't want that. You want the brake shoe to rub against your rim. So what you'll do is just let it come down until you keep putting pressure against the wheel until you get the shoe to line up exactly where you want it. And when you have it there, you just take your Allen wrench and tighten it. Now you don't want to tighten it real tight at this moment because this kind of can move on you when you go to tighten it, and you want to make sure that it's in the right place. And this was just pointed down a little bit in the front, so I just wanted to bring it back. That looks good. Looks like it's riding mostly on the rim. Now, if you can just see what happened when I tightened this moved. The brake shoe actually went down, so I have to loosen this back up, straighten it, and now I know that that's going to move on me. So I'm going to kind of hold it when I tighten it. And now let's see. That's pretty good. It's off just a little bit, but I'm not going to worry about it. We're not doing any speed racing here. And you would do the same thing to the other side if you needed to replace that shoe. And we'll go ahead and put this assembly back together. Just like that. And then we'll just Okay, something is rubbing. And that was the other caliper. It's doing fine now. So you can see that you can run into a little bit of a problem here or there when you're doing this. This is working fine. So that is how you would loosen this cable here and make an adjustment down here, and that's for big adjustments. Or if you need to replace this cable, you would loosening it here, cut it off, and you would pull it through and thread a new cable through. And these conical nuts are what you would loosen and take off to change your brake shoes. And then we're going to come up here and I'm going to show you a few things about the cable that goes into the handbrake. Up on the handbrake here for the front brake, first you'll notice this spring-loaded pin. And what that is for is as you pull your brake tight and you're applying the brake, you can push this down, and that's sort of like a parking brake. But it doesn't work that good. I would have to look into that even more about how to adjust that and make that a good parking brake. So that is what that is for. This right here, this is your first adjustment that you really should adjust if your brakes are wearing a little bit and you're pulling your handbrake, and you'll notice that maybe there's not a lot of space in between the handbrake and your handlebars, and you're pulling and you're hitting your handlebars and your front brake isn't stopping you. This would be your first adjustment. So what you'll do is, this is a knurled nut that you would just loosen, and then this is the sheath holder, I guess, or the cable holder, and it's threaded. And if you start threading it out, what that does is it pulls the cable this way, and it will make this distance closer, and it will make your brake tighter. So you can thread that out, which is counterclockwise, and then when you get it to the adjustment that you want to take this knurled nut and thread it tight up against your handbrake, and what that does is that locks this in place and it won't move on you later on. And now you can see that there's even more room in between here. But let's say that you had to replace this, or maybe you think you need to lubricate this. If you loosen the knurled nut and then this adjusting screw or whatever I'm not really sure what it's called, but as you unthread it, it will actually come out. And you'll see that it's slotted, and so is the knurled nut. So that knurled nut will come off, and then this will come off. So you have these two pieces here, and now you can see the cable. And if you pull on your handbrake, this all kind of pops out. And if you want to take the cable loose from your handbrake, and if you can notice, I don't have the camera down here, but as I'm pulling this, the front brake is squeezing tight. So I'm just pulling the cable and I'm going to hold on to it, and that gives me some slack. And there is a little slot. And this is something you just have to play with. But there we go. It pops right out. And what you can do is disconnect the cable from the bottom. You would have to, you really should cut the end off so you don't have all those little pieces of wire sticking out. You can pull this cable through, lubricate it with grease, and then thread it back through. And that's when you put the cable back through. If there's any pieces of a little bit of this cable, because it's a whole bunch of little wires, it can get caught when you thread it through. So that's why it's really nice just to go buy a new cable if you think you're having a problem. And when it comes time to put the cable back on, of course you won't have the tension down there because everything will be loose. But I'm going to hold on to this, and there's a hole again, like I said, with a slot. You just slide it up in, and it just really just pops in here. And then I'm going to take the slice where you can go over the cable, and then there's another slice in the nut there where it goes over the cable. And then I'll start it on the threads so I can then start threading this in, and then I will put the knurled lock nut, tighten that, and we're back to where we were at. So hopefully those few tips have helped you out. With the cable and with the adjustment on the front brake. And if you need any more help or any other questions, just leave them in the comments and I'll see if I can help you out. Thanks a lot.